Hello, good afternoon to everybody, and a very warm welcome to Global Cooperation House and to our event, our special event for this afternoon, The Heart of Wellbeing. So, a special welcome to everyone who's here in person, and welcome to all of those who are listening and watching online. It's great to have everyone here. Now, this month of January has seen an awful lot of meditation happening in this building and in this room in particular. So I wonder if, as you walked in, whether you could feel that special energy of peace that has been building over the month. It certainly feels special to be here. So a little explanation as to the organization behind today's event, the Brahma Kumaris World Spiritual University, which is the largest spiritual organization in the world for men and women, to be led by women. And it's grown from a small community of around 300 people in the late 1930s to a worldwide organization of over 1 million regular students in over 120 countries worldwide. And in a way, each one of them is doing their own explorations as to what will create a sense of well-being, not only in their own individual lives, but in their communities around them and in society in general. So if I can just ask if anyone is here for an event for the first time at Global Cooperation House. Do we have any first-timers? A few. Special welcome to all of you, and welcome to those who are returning. Before we get going, a few house rules. If you need the washroom or you'd like a drink of water, the facilities are just opposite the entrance at the back of the hall. So if you need to take a comfort break, then do that whenever you need to. Also a request for you to put your phone on silent or turn it off, as we will be doing some meditation as part of today's event. That would be wonderful. And in case of a fire alarm sounding, you will be required to immediately evacuate the building, and the ushers will guide you towards the nearest emergency exits, and you can tell the ushers because they're wearing a coloured sash. I have to say, we're not expecting any alarms, so if you hear one, then do follow those guidelines. That's wonderful. So today's event, The Heart of Wellbeing, is actually being dedicated to the memory of the founder of the Brahma Kumaris, Brahma Baba, who passed away on January the 18th, 1969. And that's why January is for us a very special month of meditation. And he committed his life to uplifting not only individuals, but society and the world in general. He very strongly held a vision of a better world. And he was particularly keen to see women being more empowered in their lives, both as individuals and also as spiritual leaders. So that has been a focus since the very beginning. And well-being is a theme that has been at the heart of the organization since the beginning. So I'm sure Brahma Baba would really approve of the discussion that we're going to be having here this afternoon. So what exactly do we mean by well-being? It's a word that we use, but are we clear on what we mean when we use the word? For me, well-being is an alignment to your own inner self, maybe an alignment to your own highest potential. As you can see, I've been doing my own research on well-being this week, and I can report that spending 7 hours in accident and emergency does not enhance a sense of well-being. Neither does having your broken wrist yanked by a doctor. Definitely doesn't enhance a sense of well-being. But if you Google well-being, it talks about well-being as something which affects the whole of your life, all the different compartments of your life, whether that be your work, your home, the environment around you, your friends, family, key relationships, your financial well-being. your emotional well-being, what you do with your leisure time, your sense of security. Well-being really goes deeply into every aspect of our life. And it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. You can kind of get one thing working right, but then there's another part that needs attention. And it's very hard, if not practically impossible, to have all aspects of your life feeling that they're aligned with your own inner purpose and well-being at the same time. But the online definition talks about well-being to do with health, to do with your physical, mental, emotional, and social health, your place in society. It talks about prosperity, feeling prosperous in your life. It talks about comfort, well-being relating to comfort. And of course, those all come together, and the proof of them coming together is when you feel a sense of happiness. Inner happiness is an indicator of well-being. So here to guide us during the afternoon in our exploration into the heart of well-being, we have two wonderful friends and speakers who I'm really looking forward to hearing what they have to say on this subject. I think we're in for a real treat. Let me introduce you first of all to Stewart Wallis. He's an advocate for a new economic system as a way of promoting well-being for both people and the planet. Now, Stewart began his career in industry, starting out as a geologist. He then went into banking for quite a few years. And then he joined Oxfam for 10 whole years and was responsible for a staff of 3,000 people in 70 countries. And he was particularly involved in the aftermath of the war in Rwanda and the genocide and the displacement of millions of people at that time, and trying to meet their needs was a particular triumph, and he actually received an OBE for his work with Oxfam. He then went to work for something called the New Economics Foundation, the NEF, which looks at both individual and collective well-being, and has done a lot of research into this area and produced policy with the hope of influencing policymakers. And then most recently, Stewart has come out of retirement to become the chair of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, which is looking at different ways to bring about a new economy globally around the world. And of course, economies have changed over the years, so the question is it possible to change it again? And if so, how would we go about doing that? But really looking at the economy as something that underpins our individual sense of well-being. So really important work there, which we'll be hearing more about in just a moment. And then, of course, we have Sister Jayanti, who's known to many of you. She is the additional administrative head of the Brahma Kumaris, keeping with that tradition of having women as leaders. And Sister Jayanti has spent her adult life promoting spiritual values, both in individuals, but also in communities and in society at large. Really a tireless campaigner, you could almost say, for bringing spiritual values back into the discussion. And she's travelled extensively for many years, decades, inspiring millions of people around the world to make positive changes to their life by adopting spiritual values that really do make a difference, and particularly through the teaching of Raja Yoga meditation, which is the form of meditation that the Brahma Kumaris teaches. Sister Jayanti is also the Brahma Kumaris representative of the United Nations in Geneva. And since 2009, she's headed up the Brahma Kumaris delegation to the COP conferences, the Conference of Parties, trying to really bring a spiritual voice to the discussions and show the relationship between our inner consciousness and our outer world, and making a difference through shifting inner realities. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Stewart Wallis and Sister Jayanti. Please come to the stage. Come and take a seat here, Stewart. Lovely to have you with us.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Travelled up from, is it Exmoor?
Yeah, Exmoor.
Wonderful. You had a nice blue sky for your journey.
Gorgeous.
And Sister Jayanti's come from Oxford, where she was part of a nice gathering of Icelandic people looking at leadership. So both leading very full and very interesting lives. So great that they can share this time together to help us explore this subject of well-being. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, Pippa.
Stewart, maybe we could just dive straight in and look at your 5 principles of well-being as a place to start. How do you identify those?
Of course. I think one thing I would say is I would distinguish well-being from transitory happiness. Because, I could be happy if I was taking a legal substance, but I wouldn't be flourishing. And therefore, you're talking about happiness over a long term. It's not just a moment of happiness. It's about, as you said, Pippa, the connection between the inner and the outer and how all the bits fit together. At the New Economics Foundation, we did quite a bit of research into, and we worked with the government foresight agencies, into what are the factors that individual people can do to increase their well-being. And this was actually quite an interesting scientific study with quite a lot of people. And we came up with 5 a day of well-being, 5 a day of fruit and vegetables. Can people remember that?
Absolutely.
And the 5 a day of well-being are fairly simple things, but they're important. Some of them are very obvious. The first is keep active. We know that just physically walking, exercising gives you endorphins. That is part of, we're an animal as well as a soul and a human being. And so keeping active, using our bodies, that's important. The next is keep learning. And it's interesting, I was just sitting next to one of the BK people who's been coming here every day virtually for 50 years to learn and saying how she's still learning. And I think keeping learning, knowing how much we don't know still and how we need to keep exploring is terribly important for our well-being. That's the second one. The third is a bit less obvious. Take notice. Do you notice the birds singing? Do you notice the light on the landscape? Do you look out of the train window or the bus window? Do you look at other people? Or do you just stay inside your head, actually connecting to that wider world and taking notice? And meditation, to some extent, is taking notice, as I see it, as the inner life as well, and just being still inside yourself. So taking notice, very important. This is the third thing. Connect about your relationships, absolutely fundamental. So the quality of people's relationships is so important to our well-being. And that's one of the things that I see going wrong in the world is this sense of separation, how so many humans are separated from each other, from community, from the natural world, from their spiritual life. And so connecting to those things is fundamental. And the last one is the least economic of all, because economics, it's taught, is all about taking and transaction, whereas that is give. So if you're giving of your time, your money, and most of all your love, that's a fundamental route to individual well-being. And that latter bit, the love, is so important. So it is those 5 way of well-being, and quite a lot of the NHS trusts have picked those up and used them as a diagnosis. So it's those 5 of keep active, keep learning, take notice, connect, and give are the 5 ways to well-being.
Very beautiful. I'm sure we've made mental notes of all those 5 principles. How did they sit with you, Sister Jayanti? It's a lovely list. Would you add to that with your experience of supporting so many people over so many years who are actively looking for a sense of well-being in their life? What would you add to that?
I'd agree with each and every one of those 5, and I think it's beautifully put. Thank you.
Yeah.
And if I look at Brahma Baba's example and the things that he taught us, he put it in 3 words. your thoughts, your words, your actions. And so that in a way summarizes well-being in terms of, if I make sure that my thoughts are pure and elevated, which means benevolent, concern for others, not just for me and mine, but for the well-being of others too. And my words, are my words filled with encouragement, filled with wisdom and truth, filled with something that's going to uplift another? Because there's so much darkness in the world today that it's very easy to pick up the news and get pulled down by all of that.
Yeah.
But if I can have something in my mind that's helping me, so that's why starting with the mind, but then if my words can also be shared with others to help them be uplifted, of course then that's also beautiful, and those good wishes and blessings from them come back to me. And then my actions, can there be kindness and benevolence in my actions? One of the main precepts from ancient times is, and it's something that's universal, and we say that it's the golden rule: do unto others what you would have them do to you, and don't do what you wouldn't wish for yourself. And so if I keep those three words in my mind, but with the definitions, then it means that I can have a rich and fulfilling life. I can have a life that's of value to myself, people around me, my relations, but also valuing something for the world. So well-being on all those levels. Yes, the physical, the spiritual, the mental, the emotional, societal, all of that comes in. So with the 5, add these on, and you get the sacred 8.
Yeah, lovely. I like that.
Full path.
Yeah,
can I ask you, Sister Jayanti, about that last point that Stewart raised of giving of time, of money, and of love? Because you could say, if you're looking for well-being, you're looking to receive. But here is the idea that actually you can increase a sense of well-being by giving. And I know that service or giving is a fundamental principle in the Brahma Kumaris, and giving without any expectation of return. Could you say something about this spirit of generosity and giving?
There are from India that have come into everybody's language here. One is the word yoga, and for me that means meditation, the connecting with the divine, but also karma. I think everybody, whichever background they come from, they've heard this word now. And so if you think about the law of karma, when I sow seeds, if it's flowers then and fruits, I'm going to receive those. And if I sow seeds of harshness, of bitterness, then what I'm going to get back is the same. And so it simply means that when I'm giving, and if I'm giving it without that expectation, I'm giving it so that I can get a return. But if I'm simply giving out of love, out of the spirit of generosity, then it comes back to me multiplied. And really it applies on all levels. Even if you feel that your body can't make it, but you do something for another, you get strength in your physical body. Even if you have just a little and you share that with somebody who has a greater need, it multiplies and comes back to you.
Yeah.
And when I say, I don't have time, but I make a little bit of time for somebody, then time somehow seems to expand, and there'll always be enough time to do what is needed. So it works in a very beautiful way. What you give comes back to you multiplied.
So giving really is receiving.
It is, definitely.
Stewart, if I could come to this notion of whether it's possible for me as an individual to flourish or to feel a sense of well-being when those around me are not experiencing that and are not flourishing. Is that possible? And I'm wondering as well, we've learnt in recent years about the way in which trees function, and their root system communicates with other trees, and they can even send water and things to trees that are really struggling. This idea of no man is an island.
Yeah.
We exist as communities, and for us to really thrive, that can only happen when we're living in a community and a society that is thriving, and yet very often that's not the case. How do we square that?
I think that's one of the most difficult things, Pippa, because all the research shows that if a society is very unequal, or if a society is destroying its environment, or if all the animals are being killed off, as we know, 60% less population of animals since the 1960s, and many other creatures, that affects everybody's well-being. If people aren't secure, if people are suffering. And so it affects literally everybody, including the really wealthy. So the idea that they can cut themselves off, I'm not convinced that they can flourish with well-being. So it's then very difficult, but I come back to what you were saying, Jayanti, that it needs as many of us as possible still holding in that sense of that all we can do is put love out there, is to help, and that if enough of us do that, it can shift things however difficult they are. So I've seen really difficult situations, but where there's trust and communication between people, and collaboration, where despite terrible poverty or things, those people are thriving. There's other places where they're not, and you see both things. So it comes down to what each of us individually and collectively do, and that's what matters. It comes from us ourselves. And I've only learned some of those lessons the hard way in life. There were times in my life where I was so angry at the world, and I really, I was not functioning well myself, and I wasn't doing well for anybody else. And suddenly things switched, and I just saw I can't change the past, I can change the present. I can change who I am now, and I can do something in this world to make it better. And it's more of us that do, just that sense that we've got agency. That's the thing to hold up, and we've got agency, and we can put things out there, and we don't know what always the effects would be. As you say, you put them out there without knowing the return. That's not the point. But the more we do that, the more it shifts things around us. I'm absolutely convinced by that. So even in quite bleak situations, it's absolutely the reason to think all the time, let's not dwell on what has just happened, let's dwell on the present and what we can do, and what we can do to shift things. And
not just how are things for me, am I okay, but how are things for other people.
Yeah, exactly.
As well. Sister Jayanti, what would you say is the importance of feeling part of a community where you take care of each other as members of that community? How important have you seen that as being?
It's been hugely important. When Brahma Baba started, he created a community. It just happened. Many people were drawn and attracted, and so they came together. And what held them together in that initial period was just meditation. And so it was meditation, the connection with the divine, but the awareness of one family. And so they came together in a very beautiful consciousness that this is my family. They came from different places, different backgrounds, but it was one family. And today, many of us who come here every day for meditation, we come with different languages, different countries, different cultures, but again we see ourselves as a family and a community. And it's been tremendously helpful to be able to move forward spiritually and come to that awareness of well-being. It couldn't have happened just with me and my connection with God on my own, but having this spiritual family together has been wonderful. During COVID times, it was particularly noticeable. Although people couldn't come here because of restrictions for many months, and then gradually the restrictions were being lifted. But in that period, we then set up a system of telephoning people. There were just 12... There were just 12 people living between these two houses to keep everything going. And it was very good because what they did was allocate different tasks, but also we met together on Zoom, online, and so the sense of community stayed because of the classes that were happening. But also people set up a system amongst themselves where they would phone different people every week, and they had a rota system to do that. And so again, that kept people very close. And I know that then as soon as the doors opened, many were ready to come back in and join us. And so I think that community sustained everybody through that period. But also today, when you see that there's a lot of suffering going on outside, what we do is, yes, whatever we can do with the people we are in touch with on an external level, we'll do that. But meditating together has meant that we're able to send those vibrations of God's light and God's love to others. And that has been a huge support for people. And they write and tell us, or they phone and tell us about how they felt that extra help reaching them through those vibrations. And that's something that everybody can do. Even if I can't come and visit you in Gloucester to find out how you're doing with your recovery, we can send you good vibrations and good wishes so that the healing happens more swiftly than it would otherwise.
Thank you. That feels like a real blessing. But it is important to feel that you matter to other people, and also that other people are important to you, because that gives a sense of purpose.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting. What this person called Sebastian Junger, who wrote a book called Tribe, but he said something like, humans don't mind hardship, in fact they thrive on it. What they cannot manage is not feeling necessary and not feeling valuable. And we've created a society too often where people don't feel valued and valuable. And that requires a sense of purpose, it requires community, and it requires being rooted either in community or a faith or a vocation or relationships. But it requires that rootedness in our lives. And that rootedness, I think, is so important to being then able to give. I think if you're not rooted, it's very much harder to give to others and to keep that sense of not being destroyed by the forces out in the world.
And yet loneliness is so prevalent in our society, and people aren't always connected to a community, and they feel a sense of, well, if I went, it wouldn't matter to anyone else, and that is a desperate feeling.
Oh yes, and you get whole communities who feel they've been forgotten. I mean, some of the ones in South Wales, for example, you speak to people and they feel nobody cares about them. And you get that, and so it can even be at a community level, and so that sense that everybody is valued and is valuable and has some purpose in their life is fundamental, I think, to all humans. I think is and our economic system and to some extent our political system has all been destroying that, and we've been building up this world of separation, built in with both exploitation and extraction, and and also the idea. There's this terrible phrase, homo economus, economic man. The idea that we're all out there, we're driven by the need to defend and to conquer, in effect. That sort of that vision of who we are as humans, and almost this social Darwinism that was preached for a long time, that if only you look after yourself and your selfish ends, then it'll be best for the whole world. It's such rubbish. It's such dangerous rubbish.
Well, let's move on to this as you've now raised it. This idea of a well-being economy, because we talked about the principles of well-being for the individual, of being part of a community. But how does the economy underpin well-being? Because some people, that connection might not be obvious.
No, and it isn't obvious. But first of all, we define an economy really going back to the Greek, oikos nomos, which is actually the management of the household. And so it's much wider than just how money flows. It's how we manage our household here on this planet. And our household is everything from the literal household through to our communities and our planet and our nations. So the economy, how we manage that household, really matters. And when you look at many faiths, when you look at indigenous groupings, whether you look at modern neuroscience and see what the actual drivers are for humans, or whether you go to communities anywhere in the world, as I used to a lot in Oxfam, and ask people what they want in their lives, you come up with the same sort of answers. There's all that wisdom there that's been there for centuries. And what people say is, first of all, they want enough to live on. They want enough to have some degree of security. And we're lucky to some extent in this country, though it's breaking down a bit, to have health security, education security. But you also need peace, obviously. You need housing. And you also need economic security. And that means everybody in the world, and it means thinking of things like a basic income or a guaranteed job or schemes like that, so that everybody in the world has enough to live on. And that's a fundamental for human dignity. So that's the first thing people say they want. And there's enough resources in this world for everybody. We've got plenty. That's not the problem. There's enough to meet everybody's needs. It's not just not enough for everybody's wants. The second thing is much fairer. People, it really affects everybody's well-being if things are unfair. And we got such a, we were chatting over lunch. Last year, there were 4 billionaires in the world created every week. Not very fair. And the richest 1% in the world have more than 95%. And, in this country, 40% of people are frightened to put their heating on, families. So things are very unfair. And you need fairness not just of income, much greater equity of income, but wealth, time, and things like that. So there's all those dimensions. So the second thing is fair. The third thing is purpose. We've been talking that people feel rooted, feel they have a sense of purpose. And that means all your organizations, your institutions, as well as individual purpose. It means that all your institutions serve the common good. So your businesses have to make money to achieve a social purpose, rather than their purpose being to make money. So you switch things on their head. So you need all those elements, but then you also need an element of regenerating the natural world and revering all life, not seeing it as something separate. Those are some of the elements of a well-being economy. They're not all of them, but it gives you a little flavour. And what the countries that are becoming well-being economies are trying to do, they're still not succeeding very well, is drive their whole economy towards those goals. So you don't set out to maximise GDP or growth. You set, because this growth thing is ridiculous. Growth of what? For who is the question. You need growth of some things. We need spiritual growth. We need growth of, for people who are poor. You need growth, but it's growth of the right things, and things aren't going to hurt the environment for people as a whole, not just a blanket GDP growth that goes, and then we spend huge amounts of money trying to get it right. So you aim directly to achieve the goals everybody wants. You build your economy like that, and you give people more of a say in their lives, etc. It's not rocket science.
It's not. And the fact that we live in a world where 1% of the population have, what was it, 95%?
1% of the population of the world have more wealth than the 95, the low, the other 95.
How can we thrive as a global community with such disparate, topsy-turvy way of carrying on? And Sister Jayanti, I wonder about the example of Brahma Baba, who, used his wealth for the good of the whole. And that's something that we don't see so often with people who have the means of wealth creation. They tend to hold on to it for themselves, and you very rarely see them using it philanthropically. Tell us about the example of Brahma Baba, and also what the Brahma Kumaris have to say about wealth and its relation to well-being.
Stewart, you are very right in saying that there's a certain amount that every human being needs just for basic needs and survival. And what most people have told us, and they've researched on the subject of happiness, you can go beyond that number.
Absolutely.
And keep accumulating, but it doesn't increase your happiness. Probably it's going to increase your worry and anxiety about what's going to happen. Either is it going to be stolen? Am I going to have access to it? What's going to happen? And so Brahma Baba had a vision, and that vision was of a better world for all, one of love, of harmony, of unity, of justice, of truth, peace. And he went away to think deeply about what it is he was being asked to do. And he understood after a while that a change could only happen through education. It wasn't that God would wave a magic wand and things would be okay, but it was when human beings had a spiritual education that spirituality would then help them create a better world for themselves. Yes, with God's help and power, but they would be the ones whose hands would move in that direction because the heart was in the right place. And so, having understood that, he started the community with his own hard-earned wealth. He wasn't born into wealth. His father was a teacher, a school teacher, but he had earned his wealth through his acumen, his qualities, his honesty, integrity. People trusted him. His creativity was well known, so he did amazing things as a jeweler. And at that point, when he understood what needed to happen, he surrendered all his wealth, and what he did was create a trust of 8 women, 4 young women and 4 elder women, married women. And so this trust of 8 women then administered all his wealth, so that he couldn't say that this is mine. He didn't own it anymore. It had truly been surrendered. And the first thing that they did was meditate together for 14 years. But they moved from Karachi to India in 1950. And this was the guidance of the One Above. And in that, what they were told is that it's time to move and come. And of course, soon afterwards, there was a military dictatorship in Pakistan. So if I look back on the sequence of events, it was definitely guidance. It wasn't a human mind deciding, let me do this now and let me do that the other. And after another year in which they were still meditating, then they went out to the different cities and places in India where they had relatives who were calling them to be with them. And wherever they went, centers started. And that's how the growth of the organization happened. But the teachings were very much based on spirituality. And so one of the concepts was you do not charge for anything. You don't charge for spiritual teachings, especially because that's like the sunshine. It's available for all, open for all. And so spiritual teachings were to be shared with everyone who was ready for them. And so people who took those teachings and understood and practiced them and benefited from them in their own lives then contributed either with their thoughts or their words or their wealth and other ways in terms of the physical world, so that then others could come and take benefit. And that's the principle with which we continue today also. When I first shared these ideas with people in London, they said, how long do you think your centers are going to last? They can't last for long. And when they came back a few years later, we'd moved from where we were earlier to Global House, this house, and they said to me, "You must be doing something that's right." And it's true that if you have a vision and you have given all that you have to make that vision become a reality, others are also inspired. And when they share that vision and have that passion in their hearts, they will give all that they can, their time, their skills, their energy, because it's not only money that makes things move. If people don't have the skills, they don't have the understanding, they don't have the wisdom, they don't have the ability to communicate and connect with everyone, all the things you were talking about earlier, nothing is going to flourish. But yes, wealth is definitely one of the factors that's important to be able to manage. But it's connected with all the other aspects of well-being also. So Brahma Baba taught us that there'll always be enough. If you have a pure thought, an altruistic thought of serving others, there will always be enough. There'll never be enough for you to squander, but there'll always be enough to do the task that's needed.
I was going to ask you about that because it seems a critical thing that, there are quite a few members within the organisation who are taken care of, and the money is there to do that, but then their needs are very simple. And we don't always need everything that we think we need. And if only we could simplify our lives, then there often is enough, and a sense of well-being can just be abundant.
It has to be that shift in attitude, that what I'm looking for and what I need is actually within myself. And what meditation does is allow that energy of the divine to touch you, so that the goodness that is there within you, and it's there within every single human being. So that energy of the divine allows that goodness to emerge, and you begin to see magic happen for yourself, but also for others around you. And so yes, that makes things move forward, but also then you realize that you don't need a dozen of something, just a little bit is enough. And what you have the willingness to share. And so that spirit, that attitude changes and things happen beautifully. When Daddy came to London, she had just one little suitcase and that was it.
This is Daddy Janki, her picture here. She was the instrument that worked with Sister Jayanti to establish the work of the Brahma Kumaris, not only in the UK, but from the UK all around the world.
Suitcase.
Literally. But when she left London to go back to India, that's all she took with herself. She did not take anything else. We asked her, "What would you like to take?" "I need nothing. I have everything." That was her constant mantra. I have everything. And yes, God provides, but through human hearts and hands.
A lovely saying she had was empty pockets, but a heart that was full. So, it's real food for thought. And Brahma Baba only had one pair of shoes. And whenever I look in my wardrobe at all my shoes, I often think, do I really need all these shoes? But maybe we have lives that require different shoes. That's my justification. But Stewart, Sister Jayanti has set out a very beautiful model of an economy that is very simple, that is founded in the spirit of giving and serving, and that the return for that will always be there. How do we bring about something like a new economy? What is the leverage point, the change point that makes that kind of change happen?
I mean, it's interesting. New Economics Foundation was a London-based think tank for about 50, 60 people, and we did really interesting research, and we did the typical things think tanks do, lobbying government ministers, campaigning with other people, actually creating all sorts of things like community land trusts and ethical banks and things like that. So, and we as an organisation we were dedicated to economic, social and environmental justice, and to try, probably the leading organisation working on that. And we got lots of laws changed, and we got the Cameron-Clegg government to start measuring well-being as a headline measure, and we thought that might really shift things in the economy. But we had to, in the end, come out saying we've changed lots of things, we've inspired people, but we haven't changed the system. And we worked a lot with Occupy at the time, with the Occupy movement. We worked a lot with lots of allies. But collectively, we didn't change the system. And so we went back to actually thinking, what's the evidence over the last few centuries about when systems have actually been changed? And we looked at the anti-slavery movement. We looked at the civil rights movement. We looked at, more latterly, Me Too and Black Lives Matter, and we looked also at the economic shifts that have been. And what we saw was, in all the things we were doing, and lots of other non-governmental organisations and third sector organisations were doing, were all good, but they were necessary but not sufficient. And what was needed was both a new story about who we are and how we want to live together. Some people call it a narrative, I just call it a story, number one. And secondly, a movement for change, a vanguard movement. And we looked at the economic, the good news is the economic system's been changed in Western, relatively, well, and some non-Western nations twice in the 20th century. It was changed to Keynesianism mid-century, with a much greater focus on the role of government, investment in health, education, hence the health service, national health service, things like that. And then there was a fight back against that, and a shift in the time of Thatcher and Reagan to something called neoliberalism, which a much greater focus that saying we need to free, this is sclerotic, we need to free up markets. So there was then a shift to neoliberalism with a huge focus on the same mantra you hear all the time, private good, public bad, free markets, freedom of the individual, whatever that is in those terms, strong defence, small government. And most of the neoliberal organisations, and you see that's exactly the mantra you're hearing out of Trump and his acolytes now in the States, that neoliberal vision of what's needed is terribly strong. And the way they did that, they thought they were failing. The way they did that was both creating a story, things like, unions bad, private sector good, a mantra of there's two lots of people in society, the skivers and the strivers, and you put one category into skivers. Very clever stuff, sort of creating a new story, but they also put billions of dollars, literally. They created think tanks, they changed case law, they governed who would get economics degrees from the major universities, they took over case law, they shifted the elite power in society such that then Thatcher and Reagan came in and started changing the laws and the norms, and then things followed. Now, the good news is the system changed twice in the 20th century. The bad news is the next change is not going to happen like that. There's not going to be the billions, because unfortunately too many of the people, there are some, but too many of the people with the billions want things to stay exactly as they are. Not all, thank goodness. The change is going to happen when we get radical collaboration between millions of people bringing together hearts, hands and souls. Literally hearts, hands. It's exactly what you're saying of going from the thoughts to, just remind me of the three again.
The words and actions.
Thoughts, words, action. Yeah, exactly that. And it's getting enough really people to collaborate together to really shift things. And I started, four of us, because I retired and I was enjoying looking after 20 acres of pasture land in Exmoor and doing some university teaching and writing and things like that. And then Trump happened the first time, Brexit happened, not necessarily that you could understand why a lot of those things happened. So I'm not against the people that did that. But you realise that there was just this rise of populism that was possibly going to take things further the wrong way, and we've certainly seen it with Trump now. And 4 of us sat down by a lake in northern Scotland and said, let's try and do something about this, which is pretty mad. 4 people sitting down by a lake in Scotland, or loch actually I should call it, shouldn't I? Any Scottish person would be cross with me. I mean, we're loch in Scotland. And so we created this thing called the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, and we thought we'd last 6 months. And it's a bit the same thing that you were talking about. It's having faith that something's right. And the whole ethos of that was getting people together, radical collaboration between agencies and different movements. 5 years later, we're sitting with now nearly 600 global organizations part of it, including Greenpeace and Oxfam and many others. We're sitting with 20 national hubs, some of which are charities in their own right, with huge numbers of volunteers. A bit like how the BKs grew in lots of places. And 6 countries that have signed up to being wellbeing economies, and places like Australia and Brazil seriously considering it. Now, it's early days. It might still fall flat on its face, but there's a seed of change, there's a seed of hope. There are people trying to implement this idea of a well-being economy. The World Health Organization's picked up, the UN Secretary General talks about it. So the idea has gone from virtually nothing into the zeitgeist. And it's not because we're wonderful people, we're not. We're just determined and believe that something's right. And if enough people believe it's right and enough people collaborate, then magic can happen. So the impossible, and I've seen this a few times in my life, things that seem impossible, if the intention is ethical, is connected to the spiritual, is connected to the inner world, it's connected to what needs to happen, then we can make it happen. We can change things. And
as the slogan for a new campaign, we can make it happen.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a good one.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
I mean, it's a bit like Obama, unfortunately, said, but it then sort of slightly went backwards. Yes, we can, but it's got to be rooted in something deep and something that's meant to be. But it's doable. And so,
I like this phrase that you used, radical collaboration, to make the impossible possible.
Yeah.
And I wonder, Sister Jayanti, you've spent your entire adult life trying to bring about change in society and bring about a better world. And you haven't done that with the hope of just seeing a few small changes here and there. You've done that with the absolute faith that your efforts will result in a paradigm shift for humanity. What is the Brahma Kumaris theory of change? How do you see this impossible? Because it can sometimes feel impossible. How do you see that becoming possible?
2 factors that I want to add to all the things that you've talked about. One is that time moves with its own speed, in the sense that, day and night and so on, one follows the other. And we've been through a long period of darkness, and I see the darkness not just in terms of 100 years, but much earlier than that. And it's really now the time for the day to begin. And I think that this awareness of whether it's well-being or values coming back into life, or meditation, moving from being out in the cold in the periphery right to being center stage, where last year in December the 7th, governments decided there has to be a World Meditation Day, and 21st December it actually happened. So it was such a short span of time, but I know that in many, many countries across the world, certainly wherever there were Brahma Kumaris centers, we all celebrated World Meditation Day. And so for governments to say that meditation is important is something quite extraordinary. And so we are seeing many, many changes happen on a systemic level. And I think that so we're moving towards a brighter future, but it's going to be human beings who work together to make it happen, but also the energy of the divine. I believe that although there's a small percentage of people who say that there isn't a God. Many would say, well, we don't quite know. And that's true. We have many questions and no one to give us answers. But I think 84% of the world's population believe that there is faith, that there is something divine, that there is something higher than ourselves. And so Brahma Kumaris bring in both these aspects, in the sense that the power that we need for change comes from the divine. I can say that I want to move away from greed and anger. To say it and believe it is one thing, but to do it is another. And so I can keep telling myself, I mustn't get angry, but it doesn't quite work like that. Then something triggers me and there's an explosion. I can contain myself 11 times, but the 12th time I'll explode. And so the power for transformation, to remove the negativity that I carry and to bring about the well-being aspect of all the goodness that lies within, so that I do feel well with myself. When I feel angry, I'm not feeling well with myself. I'm really upset. So when I'm happy, and I know all the things of happiness that you mentioned, but when I'm feeling comfortable with myself and I feel well, then that's how human life should be. But the power to bring about that change, remove the negativity and emerge the goodness that lies within, that takes God's power. And I believe that when I change, then the world will change also. And immediately my little world begins to change. And so my immediate family changes, the relationships, the quality of interaction, everything changes. But then the ripples reach out further. And so they say that one act of kindness impacts 125 others. Now, this was research done in Harvard at their summer school some years ago. And so if I begin to do something that's of benefit for others, many are going to change. You mentioned how there were many things that happened, but the basic thing that didn't change was the system. And so I think that there's a big shift that happens when we change our consciousness from just physical matter and thinking of ourselves just as humans, and we bring in the being aspect. When we truly come to the awareness of the inner being, and I'm pointing here because this is the location of the soul in the physical body, when we come to that consciousness of beings, then in that being, I know that everyone around me is also a being. And this awareness of one human family, one home, one planet, our home, if we can bring even a certain number of people to that awareness and we reach critical mass, I think the majority will begin to understand and change also. And I think that we're very nearly there. I think that so many different people want to do something to bring about change. Just in the space of a few years, you've mentioned the growth of the ideas. It's true that this one shift can bring about a huge change in the world, and we can create a better world together.
And a shift actually only takes a second, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, no, let's see. Yeah.
But you're both in a way talking about the same thing, but coming at it from two different perspectives. You know, Sister Jayanti is talking about, a shift from seeing ourselves as the physical body to realizing that we are the eternal non-physical being that inhabits this body, and you're talking about changing the economy, which at this, at the surface level would appear to be
so different.
Yeah.
But then,
how does that sit for you, hearing Sister Jayanti say those things?
I think I love what you just said. I mean, it resonates with me, and I want to deeply contemplate it because I've been feeling more. One of the things we found, as you say, the times are different. When the New Economics Foundation, we tried to get lots of organisations together, and we couldn't. But in this newer venture, in the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, people have come to us so regularly wanting to be part of it, And when we've asked why you want to be part of it, it's not actually what we're saying, it's who we are. And the people who work in our core team are so humble, so loving, and just the whole way they act towards others is not we got the answers. It's we're here to serve you, we're here to be a midwife, we're here to support. And that attitude of love and service has meant, that's why I think people are coming, and that's why I think we're resonating. It's back to the same place, because it's got to be coming from that deeper place of love and service, not the words, I'm getting excited, not the words that we say, but it's who we are and how we are. And we had various people who in the end wanted to control what we were doing and had very big egos, and it didn't work, and they've left the organisation, and it's actually been very important that we haven't gone along with those big egos and those famous names, but we've actually gone with just being humble and being of service, and that's made the difference. And I think now there's a whole group of people that I'm linking with who are wanting to bring all sorts of different movements together, including the spiritual and the faith groups, because I think if we can come from that place of humility and service and connection to the inner part of who we all are, then we got a chance to bring a lot of people together. And once you're right, once you get past the critical mass, I mean, you see it in all sorts of aspects of society. Once enough people are saying things, then it has all sorts of ripple, not saying things, but being different. It has all sorts of ripples into lots and lots of people's lives, and then eventually it changes the government, and they change the norms and the laws, and things flow from it. But we can shift. I'm absolutely convinced. I'm convinced also that the time is near. I have that same feeling. And
it's a time of great despondency, but it's also a time of huge hope.
Yes.
That these green shoots are really beginning to appear now. And Sister Jayanti was talking about going from a situation where meditation was really looked down upon to almost now mainstream. And I wonder if you, Sister Jayanti, whether you see changes coming from the grassroots up, through organisations such as the Brahma Kumaris, or through changing government policy and doing research to change that, and it comes from down. And I wonder how you feel you're doing in terms of making inroads into policymakers, decision makers, leaders, people who can actually make a difference. Do you feel that you're on a cusp of actually being able to do that now?
I think that change doesn't happen either from organizations or governments. Change happens when I decide I want to change. And so when, as you said, it takes just a moment, a second, to bring about a change of awareness and consciousness. And when that happens, then yes, things can move. But also I want to just pick up and come back to other things in a minute, but I want to underline what you said. When it's my ego that's driving me, I might have temporary success, but there's always going to be a fall in which I can't manage, and I feel the pain. And I don't just mean physical pain, but when other people are not willing to listen to me, then I take a hit and there's huge pain inside. But if I'm really doing something out of love and service and sacrifice, then in that awareness, like Brahma Baba, even though there was a lot of opposition, because when there's new ideas, especially in a very closed society like existed in 1936, especially the whole situation of women at that time, and Brahma Baba saying that, okay, to have a better world we need equality, we need justice, and women have to be given the chance to be leaders and teachers. He faced a lot of hostility. People who were his best friends turned around against him. And so, but he knew that it was God's task. He knew that he was just an instrument, and so there was no ego there at all. And so whether it was setting up the foundation, whether it was helping on every level within the community, supporting and never seeking prominence or visibility, but just quietly continuing to do the work. That brought about huge inspiration for the whole community. And wherever these people, and Dadi Janki and the other lady who's here, they were part of that original founding group. Wherever those people, we call them the daddies, the senior teachers, the senior sisters, wherever they went, people felt their vibration and felt that transformation in them. And so that inspired them to do the same. And so I think that it's by inspiration to others. I don't think it's by government policy, and I don't think it's even an organization that can say, do this. It has to come from you, from your heart, and that's through inspiration, by seeing others who are doing it, who are on that journey and moving further ahead. So it's happening, and I think that there'll come a moment when policymakers will say, well, we've forgotten about something. We've forgotten about the spirit. We've forgotten about the being, love and compassion, and it's these qualities that are needed. But the lovely thing that's happened in India is that the President of India currently is a woman. And not only is she a woman, she's a woman who comes from a tribal background first, and she's also a Brahma Kumari. And so I'm sure that she's quietly influencing many others in terms of meditation and spirituality.
Maybe the answer is both and. It's from the grassroots, it's from government, it's from our inner being, but it's the collective.
Yeah. But I think almost you put your finger on it. It's about we're all human beings, including people in government. It's amazing. You know, I used to. Thank goodness I don't anymore, because it was one of the, like being in a permanent cocktail party. I used to go to Davos every year for a number of years, and that was a very different experience. But even sort of CEOs of big companies, you know, talking multi-billion companies, would say they feel a prisoner of the system. You hear so, and in the past at Oxfam, talked to sort of senior government ministers, foreign secretaries, and they would say, I can't do this because there's not enough will from the people. So it's all, we need to change right through the system. And I see something a bit like an ecosystem. There's lots of different parts, but it's fractal. There's diversity, there's unity in diversity. There's lots of difference, and there has to be difference. But they form a whole, and ecosystems have ways of information coming up and flowing back to keep the whole together. And that's where we're trying to get to. But it will come, as you say, by the transformation of the people. And I'm very struck, you know, you were both saying it's just a moment. I mean, my first wife died of cancer very young, and we knew she was going to die for about a year and a half, or a year and a bit. And at one level it was a terrible time, but at another level we got closer and closer, and it was a time of great love. And then she went, and then silence, and I raged against, you know, we had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I raged against the world, and I raged against God, and I was so angry. And that went on perhaps 2 years, and I was destroying myself. I wasn't being the parent I wanted to be, that I did my best. And then just one day I was just lying on a bed quietly, listening to the birds, and suddenly, just in that moment, and I can't fully explain it, everything switched. I just realized not only could I not do anything about what had happened, I was just making myself bitter and angry. What I could do is do something with what time I had left, do something worthwhile in the world. And I'd been given a gift. I'd been shown that life was short. It's not a gift I would have wanted to be given that way, but I'd been given a gift. And I then, ever since then, I said, right, I've got to use that gift. I've got to live every day. I've got to do something that will help other people. And so it is sometimes just that moment. And it came actually out of a moment of stillness, and it was very interesting, I think.
Thank you for sharing that. It's actually very poignant that we can turn any situation of adversity and make it into a learning, if not a gift. And I think that's quite a nice point to bring this conversation to a close, that no matter what is happening to us in our life and around us, we hold within us the power and the potential to reframe it in such a way as it actually creates a sense of well-being rather than a sense of hopelessness. I'd like to just ask you, before Sister Jayanti leads us into a meditation, just to close our time together, if you were to have two take-home messages for how we can increase a sense of well-being in our lives, what two things would you offer as a gift to carry away from today's session?
Sorry?
Shall I begin?
You go first, yeah.
Make time for yourself, first and foremost. Not in a selfish way, not in an external way, but really time for silence. The gifts of realization come through silence. They don't come when I'm noisy or when there's a lot of noise in here and clutter. And so to create that space inside of silence and connecting with the divine. And also to fill yourself with spiritual study. So that this container is filled with truth and wisdom, and not just with the rubbish that we pick up from whatever is going on outside. So first, look after yourself internally for well-being. And secondly, something that you've shared, something that you've taken from the day, from the morning study, share with others, with one other person, two other people, so that you help them move in the right direction too.
Very practical and very beautiful. Thank you, Sister Jayanti.
Yeah.
Hard to kind of follow that, really.
I know, I'm not sure I can. I'd agree with so much with all that. I think, go back to those 5 ways to well-being, we know what is needed for our individual well-being. And those things of connection and taking notice and giving of our love particularly is crucial. But then also, each of us hold on, however difficult some things can seem to be, and obviously some people's circumstances can be incredibly difficult. We can change things. We are agents. If we come from a place of humility, of service, then it's amazing what can happen. And we mustn't ever set out, I'll feel better if I do that. Do you do it because that's what's important in the world? And if one does that with humility, then be amazed what can happen. We are agents, we're not helpless. And I think together we can change a lot, and things are changing radically.
I think you did follow that.
Yeah.
Beautiful, really, really beautiful. Well, Sister Jayanti, your first point was to spend some time with yourself and some time in silence. So why don't we put that point into practice straight away with a moment of shared meditation. And if you're new to meditation, just flow with it. Sister Jayanti will guide you with her own thoughts as we bring our time of sharing together to a close. Thank you, Sister Jayanti.
Just sitting quietly, comfortably, so that the body is still. I go on an inner journey and I watch my thoughts. And I select one thought, that of peace. I hold peace in my mind. And I begin to feel peace deep within my own being. Peace feels natural and comfortable. And in this awareness of peace, I can sense the presence of the divine, the source of light, of love, of wisdom, of truth, of power. And in this connection, it is as though all of these treasures flow into the soul. And from the source, it is not only I who can receive, but these qualities are unlimited, as vast as the ocean. And these qualities reach out to my human family everywhere. And I realize that all of us are deeply connected, eternally held in the bond of relationship of one family with the Supreme, the Divine, as our parent. And my thoughts, connected with the Divine, reach out not only to the human family, but to all forms of life. And all aspects of nature. The light, the love, and the purity from the Divine surrounds us all. I hold this awareness of who I am and what it is I must do, and the connection with the Divine. I come back to the awareness of this room and this moment in time, but now carrying this awareness of who I am. Om Shanti. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Jayanti. And thank you so much, Stewart, for both of you sharing so deeply and honestly from your hearts. You've given us so much to think about and put into practice and hold in our hearts. So can we give a round of applause? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for your brilliant questions, and I could see that this must be in pain, but you're managing brilliantly.
Didn't feel a thing. Didn't feel a thing.
Thank you.
So before we gently go our own ways, let me just tell you that if you're interested to continue the discussion, there's actually going to be a session here tomorrow afternoon, which will very much be a taster of the meditation that is practiced here, Raj Yoga meditation. And if you would like to join that, then the details will be on the website, which I'll give you a moment. There's also a Life Changer afternoon course, which sounds very inviting, on the 2nd of February, that's next Sunday, and that's called Manage Stress, Manage Life. And you can find details of both those events and all the other courses and events on the website for this house, which is globalcooperationhouse.org. So on your way out, the bookshop is open, and if you would like to put your name forward for tomorrow's session, you can just see them at reception as well. It's been an absolute pleasure having you all here this afternoon. You've been a brilliant audience. I could feel your attention didn't waver once during that session. So thanks to all of you for coming and contributing your energy to what has been a very special event. So as a final gesture of sharing the love, we have a tradition in this house of offering a little sweet meat, a sweet treat called a toli, which is cooked with love and shared with love, and a little blessing card for you to carry away and keep beside your bed and remind yourself of all the uplifting thoughts that we have shared this afternoon. So if you'd like to come forward and receive that from Sister Jayanti before you go, that would be lovely. Enjoy the rest of your evening. From me, Philippa, thank you and good night.